Prepare to be amazed as two men, legally classified as vintage, compete to recall pop culture nonsense from a time when parents smoked in grocery stores and Ronald McDonald roamed free, judged and scored by artificial intelligence. Chris and Jeff sift through the glorious wreckage of a gleefully neglected childhood, hoping to find meaning. Nice pull, because if we don't remember this crap, you know damn well someone's gonna try and reboot it and make it way worse. All right, Chris, we're back. Another episode. Again, no more mention of episode 70. That is behind us. We don't need to keep bringing it up.
None.
It's gone. And there is a little bit of a change, you guys, to the format for Nice Pull. We did get some audience feedback. Lots of you love the scoring system, right? You love hearing who won and going through meticulously on nicepollpod.com, clicking on the scoreboard and the scores to see who did what poll. And then there was a lot of you that said, let us do that if we want to, but let's just get some more content on the show. Let's skip past all of that. We can go there if we think we need to, right?
Yes.
You know, look, for what it's worth, Chris did win the last episode.
Hey, that's worth a lot.
I'm kind of okay with burying the score on the website because I'm getting my holy ass kicked almost every single episode. So just letting you folks know, we're going to jump right in, Chris. So what is the topic for today?
The topic for today, unfortunately, we touched a couple episodes back. We touched on some deaths, right? There were some pop culture figures from our lifetime who passed away over the past couple of months. And we talked about them and their impact and some of their achievements. But just in the last week or so, we had another one who I think he kind of deserves his own recognition based on that because of, he wasn't a wrestler and he never had a sitcom or anything like that. And I think he was just more iconic. And especially because I think when we get into it, I think we can kind of, obviously we'll describe why we feel that way. And that was Robert Redford. So Robert Redford passed away at the age of 89, which is like, 89, I don't know, 89's a good run. Right? You think? I mean, I think you can kind of say, oh my God, how tragic. He was 89. He was 89. Robert Redford, filmmaker, obviously actor, director, created the Sundance Film Festival, which we'll talk a little bit about, which was hugely influential and changed a lot about movies. And obviously an iconic sort of sex symbol for our moms, that kind of stuff, I guess. But Robert Redford, and really wanted sort of appreciation, tribute, whatever we talk about it. Because again, before I flip it over to you, Jeff, I don't remember a time. Robert Redford has always been in our lives, and now he's not, although his work will last forever. So when I say Robert Redford, Jeff, what do you think about? Or what is it, what does he mean to you?
Yeah, the first thing I think about, Chris, is alliteration. Robert Redford. I don't know if that was his original name. You probably know. You are the master of things like that. But Robert Redford just rolls off the tongue. It's synonymous with all the other giant legendary actors from when we were kids. Of course, his ongoing co-star Paul Newman. Two equally handsome guys in their own right. And yeah, you're right. It was always Robert Redford. He's always just been a dude that's been alive and sort of the epitome all throughout our childhood of the super handsome Academy Award level type actor, and just seemed by all intents and purposes a really great guy. I don't know anything about his personal life. Again, like we say with so many of these celebrities, he managed to, I think, mostly stay out of the news with whatever his own personal opinions were on things. I could be completely wrong.
Totally.
Did he have any controversy? I don't know.
Or scandal?
Tell me,
no, he didn't. I mean, and obviously,
yeah.
like he wasn't of that era of the Entertainment Tonight or TMZ, which you're unfortunately familiar with a little closer. He wasn't
Yeah.
of that era. I mean, I guess he had a wife and kids, going to, like, the interwebs and looking on Wikipedia. Yeah, he was married, he had some kids. No, yeah, like I said, nothing publicly humiliating, not even like a DUI or anything like that. No criminal charges. When you go through those celebrity mugshots, you don't see Robert Redford. Um, so just kind of that, and even like you said, just the alliteration. His even sounds like a movie star in the Robert Redford, and that was his real name. This wasn't like a made up name. This wasn't like a Spencer
Mm.
Tracy or a Rock Hudson or something like that. That was his actual name. He was born to be a movie star with his looks,
Yeah.
with his personality, and with his alliterative name, as we touched on. So yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't know a lot about him other than I do remember. Yeah, my mom and that generation when it was like, and he was almost like he was almost like a phrase. "Oh my god, he's like Robert, he's good looking, he's like another Robert Redford," or "He's no Robert Redford." You know what I mean? So he was like a standard on so many levels, I think.
Yeah. My first memory of Robert Redford was me glued to the TV set, like you and I have talked about many times. I was probably sick that day,
Mhm.
and in the afternoon, I'm watching episodes of The Twilight Zone.
Uh-huh. I know where you're going.
And Robert Redford, yeah, I think that was probably one of his very first acting roles, close to
Mhm.
it. He appeared in an episode where he played Death,
Yes.
but instead of playing a dark, sinister, grim reaper, with the scythe and, the
The
skeletal
Hood.
appearance and the dark cloak, yeah,
You couldn't
foreboding,
make
he was, yeah, he
that's
was
Robert
this really
Redford, come
nice
on.
guy. It's Robert Redford, for gosh sakes. And so it was a woman that lived out on her own in the Ozarks, in a tiny little cabin. And she knew that death was coming for her. And she had
Mhm.
suspected that the wounded soldier who's knocking on her door for help is really death, and she
Mhm.
doesn't want to let him in. And at the end, he's just this really sweet, nice guy, and she realizes she was right. He is death. It was kind of a trick, but death is not a bad thing. And it was like this very kind of heartwarming thing where you could see an early Robert Redford, where he just kind of made the audience feel at ease, and he just had a very cool demeanor. Um, we have like what 10 or 11 of those guys from back then that were just superstars, right at the top of their game. The highest A list you could get to would be Robert Redford and Paul Newman and people like that, right?
Right, right, and I wanna say Agnes Moorehead was actually the old lady, right? So, who played Endora on
Uh,
was it? I may have been? Why did I think that?
Yeah, Agnes Moorehead, who, played, in Bewitched, and
Mhm.
Dora, as we all know, and by the way, I'm not going for points on that, I just wanted to mention it. She played a great episode where, again, she was a kinda hillbilly in a cabin in the middle of
Mhm.
nowhere, but in her case, there were little, aliens
That's
landing
it,
on the
that's
roof
it.
and
Okay,
trying
my
to get in,
mistake.
and the whole
Okay.
episode is silent. She doesn't have any dialogue for the
That's
whole episode,
it.
which was
Okay, that's it.
also
So
kind of a breakthrough, yeah.
that should cost
Yeah.
me points. So you can take a few points away for that. No, but you again, yeah, so Robert Redford, um in that, yes. So they probably knew that when they were casting him. Rod Serling probably knew it's like, yeah, this guy's gonna be a movie star, right? Um, and obviously
Yeah,
he built
probably.
very slowly with films with Jane Fonda and Natalie Wood. My first, I don't know about you, is like when I first kind of became aware, and again, this is the early '70s, so even you and I are young, very young in the early '70s. Um, and I think in the periphery, I heard about Butch casting the Sundance Kid, right, for whatever is in the air. Parents saw it and talked about it. We obviously didn't have cable or streaming or VHS, so we couldn't watch it if we didn't go to the
Right.
theater. I did go to the theater, and my first Robert Redford film, and this is the one that kinda sticks out for me a little bit, was The Sting, and you'll appreciate this because I saw Sting with my family, on like a Saturday afternoon at the one, the only Grossmont Theater. Okay, so I remember that
Mm,
very vividly. It won all
yeah.
kinds of awards. And you think about it, you're 7, you're watching this Sting, which is great film, it won Best Picture that year. Um, Set in the Depression. they're con men and grifters, right? And they're actually they're bad guys. I mean, they're crooks, but again, you have to. At the time, I didn't really realize that it's just like, but yeah, there's people are starving literally. It's the depression, it's the con men and the big con, and Paul Newman. So they only did 2 films together, and this was the second one. Um, and then Robert Shaw and kind of not sure what's happening because of what goes on, and they set up an off-track betting place, and they pull off the big con and they rip off Robert Shaw, and at the end it looks like they shoot each other, but they actually don't. So it was kind of like a twist ending, but it wasn't a twist ending. And I'm 7, and I'm kind of going, there was a half-naked lady earlier on in this film, and like this burlesque kind of scene, but that was it. That was just like, okay. But I remember even going, the music, the entertainer, Scott Joplin music, great movie. And I think that to me was like, oh, so that's this Robert Redford guy that I've been hearing about. And then I never stopped hearing about him, even as he evolved and retired and whatnot. How about you? Is there something that jumped out as just for you as Robert Redford goes?
Yeah, well, The Sting was a huge movie for me because when I saw it, I wasn't a little kid. I was definitely a bit older by the time I finally saw it. And I just felt like, even at the time, that movie is about as perfectly written as a movie could be.
Mhm.
It pulls off in the writer's world. It pulls off something that is very hard to pull off in a movie, which is called the twist.
Mhm.
If you can actually pull a full left turn twist on the audience and they look back and go, shit, I should have been picking up all the little secret signals. There were clues along the way, but damn it, you got me. Right. Just like we got done talking about a few episodes ago, Bruce Willis was dead the whole time. You know,
Mhm. Right.
the same thing, right? Oh, it was a double con. Not only
Right.
did they get Robert Shaw to believe that he was making a legitimate bet in this fake betting ring, but they made him believe that they had killed each other, so he had no reason to go after them. And of
Mhm.
course, they walk off laughing with their arms around each other at the end. And the FBI agent is on their side. It's not
Right.
even an FBI
That
agent, right? And it's like, wait a minute,
That's just it. You hit on that.
yeah,
You have to. There's several twists, right? And
yeah,
spoiler alert: if you have not seen The Sting, again, released in 1973, won the Best Picture in 1974. Um, uh, uh, yes, The Hitman.
spoiler alert. I think we're safe again, Chris. I've said this before. You're good. You're
Hey, we're
good.
trying to just make sure get the audience everything they want. The hitman is not who you think. Emphasis on hitman. Okay. Yeah, you mentioned the FBI agent who is Dana Elcar, who was actually right later showed up on all kinds of shows, including like MacGyver. Right, was not an FBI agent. Right. Yeah, they were. So there was all these twists, and you're right. That's like sitting there, you're banging out, and whoever, I want to say it was David Ward. I'm not sure who wrote it. Um, on that typewriter. Hopefully they had an electric typewriter even then, but you're banging out these it's brilliant. It's like, oh no, here's another twist.
Yeah,
Here's another twist. So it's just
yeah,
like you think you've caught, and most people, yeah, you're like, wow, that was so it's exhilarating, right? They made a
yeah,
terrible sequel several years later. They couldn't get Redford and Newman, so they got Jackie Gleason and Mac Davis. That could be a whole other episode about sequels that never should have happened. But just at its and then I think maybe the best part, Jeff, is looking at it now, because I watched it on Netflix maybe a year or so ago. It holds up not just for all the technical and mechanical and creative reasons that you said. It holds up because it's set in the Depression, right? So you're not distracted by, wow, that's an old looking cell phone, or oh, look at that car, or when you've got something that's a period piece like that, it will stand the test of time. That movie's over 50 years old. 50 years from now, you can still watch it and still think, wow,
yeah.
this is a really great film.
And I remember they set the tone at the beginning of the movie in a really dramatic way. They showed you at the beginning of that film that the stakes were very high, and
Hmm.
people in this film can die in very horrible
Hmm.
ways. You'll
Luther.
remember at the beginning
Yep.
he had a buddy, yeah, yeah. They
Hmm.
were con partners, and then that guy ends up getting murdered, his buddy that he did cons with, and of course the
Hmm.
wife is grieving, and it's just this horrible moment, and you're like, oh shit, like stuff is real in this film. Like they set a dark tone, but
They
then
did.
you start to really root for these guys because they're trying to pull something off that's pretty impressive. It has a very Ocean's 11 kind of a feel to it. If we,
Right.
even though that came later, yeah,
Right. The
great movie. The other one though, and that stuck out to me again, because of the twists and how clever they were. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, which you mentioned, what stuck out to me on that one was, and again, spoiler alert, right? You loved these guys equally. It was very hard not to love these guys, and you wanted
Mhm.
them to be successful on robbing trains and robbing banks. They even got to share the same girlfriend or wife or whatever. It's like, all right, Catherine Ross. Yeah, sure. Everybody. Yeah, you guys all have a good time. That's
Hey.
fine. But it was done very subtly, right? No, it was. It was done in a
Mhm.
very subtle,
Right.
wink, wink kind of a way, which was tasteful. But what I really loved was the humor, man. It was just so great because that famous scene where the posse or whoever is after them and now they're
They're
up
on the
against a
cliff.
cliff,
Uh-huh.
like something I can relate to,
I was
and
gonna
they're
say.
looking down. It must
Mhm.
be 60 or 70 feet to the water below. And
Rocks.
one of them
Yeah.
says, "Oh my God," I think it's Robert Redford that says, "I can't swim," or Paul Newman says
Yes,
that.
it's
And the
Redford.
other one says, yeah, Redford. And Paul Newman says, "Swim? Hell, the fall will probably kill us." Right. I don't know. It's just back then we laughed so hard. The whole theater erupted,
Right.
comic relief. Yeah. It was just
It
so great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's Western, which you didn't see did you ever laugh in a Western? Did John Wayne, or Gary Cooper ever
Mm-mm.
make anybody laugh? Probably
No,
not.
no,
So, again, I think that's
no.
when and Paul Newman, I think, a few years older and had been I think his career trajectory at the time was a little bit bigger. So, but yeah, these guys, movie stars, bona fide movie stars in this film, and they're just like a sort of I don't wanna say they're playing themselves, but they're just so relatable in that regard that it was just like, oh, yeah, and again, Paul Newman, same thing, all the women, yes, love Paul Newman and his blue eyes and whatnot, to that point, so that sex symbol part of it, but they were the kind of like and maybe again, I saw something with, like, the Redford was one of those first guys, and Paul Newman too, it's like women loved him and guys wanted to be like him, right? So there was
Right.
nothing threatening or off-putting by for something like that. But yeah, great, great. Again, also a film with what was prequel, a prequel to that film. William Catt and Tom Berenger played like them in the early days. So again, not well executed. I don't think they ever did. Neither one of well, I guess Paul Newman did a sequel when he did The Color of Money, but they were not big sequel guys.
And
Yeah.
and Chris, I have a definition for a Pee-qual. When you just said Pee-qual by accident, but I don't know if you remember a comedian back in the SNL days, early days, named Rich Hall.
Oh yeah, the
Rich
Sniglet
Hall,
guy.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sniglets, yeah, he would come
Yeah.
up with words that should be in the English language that aren't.
Mhm.
Speaking of movie theaters, one of them was Cinemuck, and that's just that crap that's on the floor just after a hundred performances of a movie, Cinemuck, right?
Mhm.
But I think Pequel would be the second movie, the follow-up movie is so bad that you have no problem getting up to go pee in the middle of it because you don't feel like you're going to miss anything. That's a Pequel, right?
That was always a challenge, right? Even today at the movies, like, you're trying to time because if you're at home, you're streaming, what do? You hit pause. You go to the bathroom, maybe you stop at the kitchen, you check your phone, you go back down, you sit down, and you hit play. But trying to time your especially when you in the movies in that, 96-ounce jug of soda, and it's just like, "How long can I last before I break the seal and have to go? How can I time it to the boring part or the part that's not important?" Or the part that the montage, the musical montage, and that's okay. So those two. Is there another part? I mean, any other roles or anything else when you think of Robert Redford in a film that jump out to you? I mean, there's
Yeah,
so
for
many. There's so many.
totally. And like I said, each movie had a different impact, right? Twilight
Hmm.
Zone, he was just such a cool, nice guy and played the role very differently. It was a surprise. Butch Cassidy, lots of humor. But I wanted to just say one more thing about Butch Cassidy, which was the ending was very unusual for a movie back then.
Hmm.
Normally speaking, movies, especially with two big name actor heartthrobs like that, would have ended in some upbeat, happy way where they ride off into the sunset on their last bank robbery.
Literally,
But this
yeah.
one famously was, all right, man, the Mexican army's out there, but we've got one chance to do this. Let's just
Mm.
go out there, guns blazing, and then they do the famous freeze frame, right?
Freeze frame, black and white, um, to the point it's just like, yes, you'd have to think, yeah, they're dead. They didn't make it. Maybe they
They
put
did not make it.
maybe
Yeah.
they, picked off a couple of banditos when that in the meantime, but yeah, absolutely unique and they probably thought, "Yeah, you're not gonna make a sequel to this movie because 'cause we're dead." So, of course, then they make the aforementioned prequel.
Well, and it was such a great choice to not show them getting gunned down,
Mhm.
right? That would have been really anticlimactic. You just got to see them in their last moment going against all odds. This time the odds were too high, but
Uh-huh.
that was really cool. The other one that really stuck with me and has to this day, and I don't know how much this movie follows the actual person that the movie was made
Mhm.
for, the biography of Liver Eaton Johnson, right? Jeremiah Liver Eaton Johnson.
Mhm.
Uh, the movie Jeremiah Johnson.
Mhm.
It's it's a great movie. It's hard to watch at times. It's definitely
Mhm.
one of those, revenge movies where people get killed in horrible ways and shit goes down. But again, man, when you're done with that movie, I remember when I walked out of it, I'm like, I want to go camping. Where's the nearest wilderness? And none of this pup tent bullshit. I'm just gonna lay
No.
out there and
In the
I'm
dirt.
gonna kill a bear and crawl inside of its skin
Uh-huh.
and survive in the wild. Did I go too
Right.
far with that? Probably. But
No,
yeah,
no,
that
I don't
movie
think
made
so.
me maybe want to get out there and light a campfire using just my wits.
And gave birth to a very at least very, I think, part of the meme slash GIF, sort of the winking Robert Redford, Jeremiah Johnson character, which will live on, and unfortunately, a lot of people didn't know, A, some people thought that was Zach Galifianakis, and B, they didn't know where it was from.
My God. Wow. That's the greatest day of Zach Galifianakis's life if somebody compared him to Robert Redford.
Exactly. Exactly. But again, so that will live on. So hey, however, it made its impact on pop culture. I think again, I could think of so many other films just as an actor, whether it was The Natural, which, everybody that to that point of people that will be a reference in sports, in baseball for the game-winning home run for again for eternity, the music, even though that's not how the book ended. Um and then at the same time, for me, I think of and this is where you probably thought this and again, I didn't even really know this till reading a little bit more about it. I always just thought it was just a role. When All the President's Men, um, he obviously, played, Bob Woodward in All the President's Men with Dustin Hoffman playing Carl Bernstein, and he not only was he instrumental in that film getting made. He was instrumental in having Woodward and Bernstein write the book to begin with. And then the book became the movie, which became, part of it's historical and it's part of our culture. And that was where somebody really took the fact that he could get a film like that made because I will star in it. I'm a big movie star. I will play this, you know, newspaper reporter for the Washington Post. I mean, imagine you're Bob Woodward and you're like, hey, I'm Robert Redford and I'm gonna play you. And I don't know if you've ever seen the two of them side by side. There's not a lot of strong resemblance there. But that kind of impact as a filmmaker or film influencer, I can't say there's a lot of people like that today.
Do you think that's how they pitched it to the real reporter, Woodward? That it's going to be your story, only you're going to be a lot better looking.
It's like
Like not ugly you, good
that's
looking you.
that's
Right.
the biggest flex ever, right? If you could
Yeah.
say, "Oh yeah, they're making a movie about my book," and it's just like, "Oh, really? Who's playing you?"
And I'd also like to point out, without Robert Redford's efforts on getting that movie made and getting that story out, we would never have had the movie Deep Throat. So good job. Good job, Robert Redford. I think
Probably.
Linda Lovelace could give him a
Alright.
little bit of a nod, like, well done, sir. Hey, that's pop culture. Come on, Chris, don't be uncomfortable with that. That's pop culture. That's in the public eye. Everyone, well, so to speak.
So, Robert Redford becomes Robert Redford, I think in that regard. He's a bigger star, evolves into, like I said, he's producing, directs a film, had never won an Academy Award as an actor, but run as best director for a film called Ordinary People, which was a film, a very serious drama with okay, and this is probably maybe this is the reason he won. He took one of our favorites, Mary Tyler Moore, and turned her into an icy cold, detached, distant mother. of a family who had one of their 2 sons had died, right? And that's the whole conflict. She's the villain, okay? She's the villain, and somehow, probably going into that, if you read a pitch, you'd go, "Yeah, I don't Mary Tyler Moore." He pulled it off. He directed Mary Tyler Moore to a great film, a very heartfelt, strong, powerful, sad film, and, Donald Sutherland, Mary Tyler Moore, wow, that was again, and that was his first film that he directed. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, very different than her, character on the Dick Van Dyke Show.
Just a little.
I would say the polar opposite, and by polar, again, I'm making a reference to how cold she was,
Okay.
yes. So it's that kind
Jesus.
of
I
an
see what you
opposite.
did there. Alright. I see what you did there. Right.
Yeah, so those for me were the big movies that stood out. Now I never did see Ordinary People, maybe because the title to me sounded boring. "Hey, it's just about ordinary people." I'm like, "Huh, okay, maybe I'll go see something like At the Earth's Core or something that has a little more
Herbie
zazz
Herbie
in the
Rides
name."
Again, right?
Rides
You went
Again. Well,
yeah.
the first time he rode, I loved it. I'm sure when he rides again, and by the way, Herbie Rides Again, not a Pee-qual. It was an absolutely
Oh,
solid movie. I
shit.
loved Herbie Rides Again.
You couldn't get enough Ken Berry and Buddy Hackett, I
That's now
think.
become part of my lexicon, a Pee-qual.
The Pee-qual, the Pee-qual. So again, and I think
Did you say Ken Berry?
Ken Berry and Buddy Hackett, right? Those were the dudes in the Herbie Rides Again Herbie movies, right? I don't know. Maybe not.
Oh, Ken
Maybe
Berry.
not.
Yeah, I forgot. He's my favorite from F Troop. So you're
Right.
right. Yeah, he was the
Mhm.
main guy. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm a
absolutely.
Larry
Okay,
Storch
got
guy
it.
all the way. I gotta go for Larry Storch.
Oh, yeah, I am too. Yep.
Just because Storch is maybe the best, worst all-time last name. Storch? It's not a name, it's a sound effect, right? That's a malady of some sort, you
And
know?
and we have to have at least one rabbit hole moment. Larry Storch and Forrest Tucker, who
Mm.
co-starred together in F Troop,
Mhm.
also starred in a Saturday morning cartoon called Ghostbusters.
That's
And
right.
this was long before the Bill Murray movie.
Mhm.
And all throughout the filming of Ghostbusters, they still did not officially have the right to the name Ghostbusters. They had to be negotiating with this other studio. And by the way, if you see the Larry Storch version of Ghostbusters, you will realize that Sid and Marty Krofft were millionaires on their production quality versus versus Ghostbusters. Jesus Christ almighty. It is hard to watch. But oh my gosh. Anyway, sorry, rabbit
I
hole.
believe that's how no, and I believe that there was a Saturday, of course, the inevitable Saturday morning cartoon of the Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd Ghostbusters, and I believe that's the reason they had to call it but they had to call it the real Ghostbusters, because I don't think they could ever litigate that Saturday morning. They probably didn't want to pay the $10 million they wanted or something like that, so they called it the real Ghostbusters. So
Yeah.
again, so with Robert Redford, I think an interesting thing, again, looking back, um at his career, and the way it evolved, and the roles he took on, and it's really interesting because if you look at, he had this front part of his career where he was in films with, like, well, Barbara Streisand, right, and Jane Fonda, and Natalie Wood, and Catherine Ross, but then he gets, like, this sort of second half of it as he's gotten older, and unfortunately what happens, the women get cycled out, and the new leading ladies gets brought in, because then he's also in films with Michelle Pfeiffer and Demi Moore, right? And people like that. He did a Meryl Streep, although I think Meryl Streep is obviously closer to his age, but just sort of he's still sustaining, Glenn Close and Kim Basinger in The Natural. So it's just like Robert Redford just kind of keeps moving along because he's Robert Redford, and they have to have these sort of, I don't want to say interchangeable because these are talented actresses, but they have to sort of replace his leading ladies with the next generation or 2 generations back, and he didn't miss a beat. It didn't impact the roles, it didn't impact his movies, and then it sort of introduced him to, I'm sure there are people out there who, if you ask them, and they might even be of our generation, the first Robert, I almost said Ronald Reagan. Yeah, please delete that. The first Robert Redford movie they may remember would be like Indecent Exposure or Legal Eagles or something
Oh
like that,
yeah.
that came in like the
Right.
80s, 90s.
Right.
And but he still had it, right? He still had that part. He still had that movie star kind of quality and whatnot. And it just kept going, right?
Well, and it's also a great example of a Hollywood trope, right? Which is men get to stay relevant, and because as they get older, they become more distinguished, and they're still alluring somehow to Hollywood. And these women that are oftentimes infinitely better actors than the guys that I would be thinking of in my mind right now. Like you said, they just get cycled out, right? Oh, you're just the old grandmother. Throw her a few lines, right? And that's about it. Just it was it's always been pretty prevalent. I think my greatest example of that would be people like Nick Nolte. That guy was in movies later on with very attractive younger actresses, and that guy, I mean, he's one of those dudes that never aged very well, to put it politely. And seeing him next to some of the younger actresses later in his career, I was like, are we are we really supposed to believe that he is somehow sexually attractive to a person that age? Unless prostitution is involved? Like, is there a chance that that person would actually even look twice at him?
I
I Good lord.
be attracted to Nick Nolte. That's a great point. I think that's a great point, but I think even but I think at the same time, he was never again, Robert Redford could pull that off because he was like I said, he became part of like,
Yeah,
"Wow, he's another Robert Redford." No one ever said, "Whoa, he's no Nick Nolte." You know what I mean? So I think he already kinda had that edge, but you're
yeah,
absolutely right, and again, you can have a whole and it's even now with, Tom Cruise stars and, Tom Cruise is in his 60s and looks like he's in his 40s and is in films with actresses in their 20s, So it's just like, okay, it's one of the great conundrums as far as films and films casting go.
yeah.
Again, Robert Redford, I think it's been a few years since he was in a film. The last film I actually saw him in, I think, was Avengers Endgame when it was like, and he was in, and also I have to give this a
Oh,
shout
yeah,
out just for
that's
the
right.
geeky part, a key role in what I think is the best Marvel MCU movie, Captain America: The Winter Soldier, which was
Mhm.
shot and made as a political thriller, somewhat inspired by 3 Days of the Condor, which starred Robert Redford. He's in the film as an ultimately a bad guy, and and again, and probably again, I'm sure an entire generation. I guarantee that's the first Robert Redford film that my kids ever saw, or a film that Robert
Wasn't
Redford
that
was in.
Didn't
You know,
that movie also have some shapeshifter foolery? I think it did. I think, shape-shifting was one of the twists in that
well, one of the
movie, if I'm
twists is
not
that they were
mistaken.
actually
Yeah,
that to go off into the Marvel part of the Marvel part of the
yeah.
presentation, they were, what you thought was Shield was actually Hydra, which was actually
Oh,
had for
yeah.
generations had actually been an evil organization and not the sort of super spy organization we'd led to believe
Even
for all these films, right?
And I'm sure the actual Robert Redford, if somebody as the director was trying to explain the backstory to him, he's like, "Dude, no. I I really don't care. I'm gonna act this character out.
Yeah.
I don't need to know what happened in episode 144, and if you can still get it in mint condition, it's worth
Right,
$13,400."
right, right.
Yeah.
Give me the pages, give me the script pages, and let's shoot this
Yeah.
sucker,
Please
right?
stop. Yeah.
So so maybe the last part, I think, again, as we look back, and again, it's pick your favorite. Like I said, it could be 3 Days of the Condor or The Natural, or if you're my mom, who's still kicking at not quite 89, Way We Were when she mentioned that. Oh yeah, I love The Way We Were. It's like Jesus Christ, mom, that movie came out in 50 plus years ago. Um, but I think he sort of took that natural progression as a filmmaker and started the Sundance. And again, I probably maybe should have done 5 minutes of research on this. Started the Sundance Film Festival, which sort of, I'm not sure, chicken and egg, the Sundance Film Institute, which was sort of a consortium for young filmmakers, aspiring filmmakers, and a simple film festival that started in Utah of all places, because that's where he lived, right? And you never saw Robert Redford get pulled over for a DUI or like getting, hammered at the Roxy because he lived in Utah, for God's sakes. But films like Reservoir Dogs and Blood Simple and Napoleon Dynamite and Sex Lies and Videotape, uh, I don't know, Fruitville Station, uh, trying to Get Out, young filmmaker. These films blew up, got purchased, became huge successful films, and the filmmakers themselves, and they owe it all to a huge chunk of getting their film at the
Yeah.
Sundance Film Festival. you know,
And it also launched the entire film festival industry,
to a
there was
certain
a
degree,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
well, yeah, of course there were already film festivals. That's silly to say it was the first one, but the amount of press that got and the amount of films that came through it that got huge is just like you said, astounding. And right after that, and I remember this because I worked up in LA behind the scenes and these studios and stuff during that time frame when Sundance was so huge. And oh my God, it must have launched 1,000 other film festivals that tried so hard to be anything close
Mhm.
to Sundance. Yeah.
I mean, I think
So,
you're
yeah.
right. It wasn't the first film festival, but I think it was the first influential film festival, right? Because it has
Yeah.
like, oh, it played there, then it's, because before it was like these films are wrapped and these are canned and there maybe these are already established or semi-established, filmmakers.
Yep.
And that in itself, that would be an enormous influence just on its own. You don't have to be an actor with all these hit films. You don't have to win Academy Awards for directing. Quiz Show, another one that he that just popped up into my head. I don't know if you ever saw that about the game show scandal of the 1950s. Great film. He directed that. Never on streaming. It's one of those. It's like, why do I keep seeing the same crap pop up on streaming all the time? But I would like to.
Just so weird because it features the actual story of the actress Patty Duke. Am I mistaken? I think Patty Duke, the actress, was on one of those game shows and fed the answer.
I don't think. I think you're right. Yeah, I don't think. No, I don't think Patty Duke was in that one. I don't think.
No, in real life. It's now this is fact and fiction and the metaverse, but my recollection is that the actress in real life, Patty Duke, in her career was brought on that game show, something like the $64,000 question or whatever it is, and she was famously fed the answers because it would get the audience super excited, and they would she got caught up in that scandal, but maybe I'm wrong.
It may be.
We don't have any way to look that up, Chris, so I
It's
don't
not
know.
well, it's not on streaming, otherwise I would have been able to see, but I haven't seen it since I probably first saw it in the theaters when it came out. Anyway, so the Sundance Film Festival, so again, just on its own, that career, hey, I started this film festival and people came along and they got their films shown and then they eventually sold them to studios and then, and then they became big filmmakers and the actors. I mean, that itself would be quite an achievement, but then throw in everything else, the film career, the Academy Awards, the influence that he did on everything else. That's quite, and then just like I said, being an under the radar movie star that they're, that's quite a life.
By the way, this just in, I just got an internal Google alert because Chris, I had that chip implanted inside of
Oh,
my
yeah,
eyeball,
I forgot to ask
so
about that.
I can just
Yeah,
get it. So,
yeah.
in 1959, at the age of 12, a very young Patty Duke was on the $64,000 question, and she was given the answers, and she got caught up in a huge scandal where people found out that it was rigged.
I did not know that part. I don't know if they touched
I
on that in the
know.
film. They may have left that part out of the film. That's gonna be my bullshit excuse for not knowing that because maybe that was too much and maybe legally they just stayed away from that. But do we have a Robert Redford? Is there somebody that we would come and again, judging from is there somebody who you would look back that because again, we were a little bit young when his career really blew up, but is there somebody that you think that sort of our generation or even the current Robert Redford?
If I'm going by my vision of Robert Redford, which is a really good-looking guy, but
Mhm.
he can also play roles where he isn't just the sappy, rom-com guy. He can actually play outside of his own normal comfort zone, and he's not a character actor, like John Wayne, who can only do one thing. He's a guy that can stretch himself, right, and also be self-deprecating and funny. I know this is very cliche, but I would look towards guys like a Denzel Washington or
Mm.
a
Mhm.
George Clooney. I guess we can throw
Okay.
Brad Pitt in there, but these are all guys who aren't just classically handsome. They have a
Mhm.
giant IMDb catalog,
Mhm.
and all of them have a range where they can
Mhm.
just really, and they're synonymous with
Mhm.
A-list. So
Mhm.
those are the first ones that pop into my mind. But
Those are great. I think those are great calls. I think especially when you talk about Clooney and Denzel because they've directed films, so they have that, and I mean, and I think so they've starred in them and directed them, and I think that's you could check those boxes off. Brad Pitt, not so much, although he's produced films. The interesting thing about Brad Pitt is that, again, yes, another A River Runs Through It, another film that Redford directed. Brad Pitt was one of the stars of that movie, and even at the time, they talked about sort of he's like a young, because his career was just blowing up, and it was like he's sort of now Redford's found like this own younger version of Brad Pitt. The ones I think about, I think from a movie star, sort of non-controversial, steady, multi-generational, played with, leading ladies much younger his age, as he still kind of goes, would probably be Harrison Ford. I think to me is sort
Yeah.
of like a very, never directed, right? But that sort of, again, non-controversial, stoic, sort of keeps to himself, private. Lot of great films, a lot of great roles. You could say, well, is he Han Solo, or is he Indiana Jones, or is he Jack Ryan, or you know what I mean? You could kind of say, all these different parts.
Well, they're all the same exact character, so it's easy to. No,
Yeah,
I'm
to a
joking.
to a
That's not
certain
fair.
extent.
I'm kidding. No, I'm
That's cool.
kidding.
That's a cheap shot, man. That's a
But
cheap shot.
he by his own admission, because Harrison's a big fan of the show, as you know. Yeah, I think it's very fair to say he's definitely a character actor. He
Mhm,
has a very narrow range, I believe, in my heart, of what he's comfortable doing in terms of
mhm,
roles. Harrison
mhm.
Ford is, but everything you said there, yeah, for sure,
Or if you try him
totally,
on Shrink,
yeah.
again, here's a plug for an Apple show. Not that we, hey Apple, the show Shrinking, where he plays the supporting role as this crotchety old um, psychiatrist.
That is a stretch for Harrison Ford, an old crotchety guy.
He's funny. Yeah, so it's like a role he's gotten nominated for Emmys for. I don't know why he's not winning, but that's a stretch. And so then I would say Harrison Ford for that movie star aspect, and then for a similar sort of impact, he's only directed a few films, but and much different. But I would say Tom Hanks, because Tom Hanks again had this long career, different films, different genres, um, and directed some. And while he didn't do like a Sundance, he was instrumental in getting he's a big, as far as World War II and veterans and everything that's happened, Band of Brothers was instrumental in getting that made. Saving Private Ryan
Oh, yeah.
was helpful in getting made. So he's still very active in like veterans affairs and things like that. So while it's not a film festival, had an impact and an influence outside of his realm, where he could just be sitting in the Hollywood Hills, drinking espresso and cashing those checks.
And let's throw Rich Schneider in there too. I think that's only fair, into that category of, classically trained, really important to the world of cinema, just dripping with talent. I'm joking. Rich Schneider's actually on my list. I know, you guys. He's on the same list with Scott Baio. I know. What a
Oh,
giant tool.
that list.
Anyway, I didn't want to, end this episode without one more of my favorite Robert Redford movies. We don't need to dig into it too much, but I just
Mhm.
wanted to at least give it an honorable mention, which was Sneakers. If you haven't seen the movie Sneakers, it was so much fun. It's a great film. It's very much of the, again, like an Ocean's 11 thing, but this ragtag team has to go up against the baddies, and each one of them has their own talents, kind of like the A Team. And it's got River Phoenix and Dan Aykroyd and Sidney Poitier. And man, that is it's such a fun film. That's my recommendation, guys. If you've never seen that movie, grab
Right.
some popcorn. It's awesome.
Directed by Phil Alden Robinson, who I think that was his follow-up to Fields of
Good
Dreams.
Lord,
So, I mean,
Chris.
so that
Jesus.
in itself, and you're right. No, great. And it's like a caper thing, exactly. But there's like it's like kind of nerdy. And I think that in itself
Very.
made
Yeah.
it even better. These weren't like tough guys. These weren't like
No, no.
punch first, talk later kind of guys. But excellent, excellent recommendation for getting in there. So there you go. So everybody, so there's your recommendations. Try to seek out Sneakers, All the President's Men, The Natural, Quiz Show, 3 Days of the Condor.
Yeah, guys, just call me up. You can come over to my house pretty much on any weekend and hang out with me, and we'll watch Twilight Zone on DVD, and we can watch the Robert Redford episodes. So just hit me up. Right on, Chris. Well, hey, as much as I loved doing the in memoriam, let's not have any more of these for a while. How's that
Let's
sound?
not. Let's not. So
All right.
again,
Well, cool. Until next time, Chris.
till next time, Jeff.
Nasty.